it works great as an attractor, but in that type of scenario, I was using the egg as my cider, if you will, right? The egg itself was my indicator. And that's just how physics works, right? However close you can get that, whatever is telling you a fish ate to the thing the fish is going to eat, is going to react faster.
And that's nice and bright to see.
Exactly.
I said it before, I don't get excited about eggs. This is an awesome egg. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Flies For. Today we are standing in the river at Decker's. Hans Mylant is with us, and we are talking about flies for tailwater fishing.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This has been quite a treat. We got to fish a little bit this morning and fish some of the flies we're going to talk about and watch you kind of go through your rig and how you build the process. I'm super excited to dive into that whole thing.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh man, this is, like I said, a real treat. One of the coolest things I saw today, you're one of our signature Tyers. You've got 2 patterns in the catalog with us now, a couple more coming, and they really utilize this idea of the Umpqua jig bomb bead and a various weight system, and you have a super cool spin on it, and it really kind of is at the center of how you build your rig. So I want to spend a little time talking about your 2 patterns here. Let's start with the one we fished the most today, which is
Side Up.
The Sunny Side Up.
Yeah, the Sunny Side Up is it's an egg pattern I came up with. It's kind of something that was years in the making. I was always trying to find a way to get a heavy egg pattern, but something that was true to size when it comes to the profile of the actual egg. So this is something that I was playing around with far before I ever knew of the jig bombs or before they came out. And I was trying to find a way to hide a bead under different chenilles or egg yarn or whatever the case may be. And there were many failed attempts before finally arriving at this. What's so nice about it is the way the jig bomb is placed on the bead. I use a technique that I like to call posting the bead. So kind of if you think of doing a parachute post on a parachute, that's kind of what you're doing with the bead here. We're building up a lot of thread underneath it and around it, just like you would with a parachute, and hitting that thread with some glue, which keeps that bead posted on a majority of the weight on the top side of the hook shank, meaning when it's fishing, it's always going to ride hook point up. And one of the cool things you can do, which I show people a lot during tying events, is if you take one of these and you drop it on the table, oh, look at that. It lands hook point up.
There's a couple of them
every single time.
And when you look down on it, I mean, it looks just like a perfect egg.
Just like an egg, and the same size as like a real trout egg. So I think that's one of the things that has helped this be so successful for me is 1, the size of it, and 2, I don't think you can find an egg with this profile on the market that packs the weight that this thing does.
No question. We did a Flies For 2025 a couple episodes ago. We all kind of nerded out on this fly because like it's a very simple fly, but it solves so many problems when it comes to a great egg pattern.
Exactly. And one of the big problem I had with eggs is specifically when it comes to Euro nymphing is most eggs are going to be buoyant, or they are going to prevent your rig from sinking, right? That's one of the biggest problems I had, and really had an eye-opening experience up on the Blue River when I was standing high on a rock and I could look down and see fish, and I was Euro nymphing and I was trying to fish a pegged egg. And I would notice that as soon as I put that peg egg on, my sink rate was just destroyed. It was like holding my fly from getting down to the bottom. And so all the other eggs on the market really don't have a whole lot of weight either. So that's when I was like, okay, how do I need an egg, and I need it to prevent or not prevent my flies from sinking.
Or you can get an egg that's all bead and like this little bit of like yarn in the back or chenille, right? It looks
and it doesn't have that true egg profile to it, right? So yeah, and I woke up one night at 2 in the morning finally and was like, oh my gosh, I had an idea. And so I ran to my tying bench and tried a couple things, and then once I finally got the sequence of wraps down, it was kind of like light bulb, like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I've been trying to do for years. And then taking it out and finally fishing it, that's when it was really exciting because you found out that, oh, fish like to eat it too. That's always a
fish
big,
smack this thing.
that's
Yeah.
a big plus.
Totally. And the cool thing is, like, you've got it in how many different colors and sizes and weights specifically, because that's a big part of how this plays into your overall kind of rig and whole experience with the Sunnyside.
Oh, big time. So it comes in 6 different colors and 3 different weights, but only 2 different hook sizes within those weights. So it'll use a 2.5 millimeter jig bomb, and that goes on the size 20 Umpqua pair to jig hook, the XC210, which
It's a nice wide gap.
amazing hook. It's one of the only jig style hooks on the market that gives you the true shank length when it comes to a size 20. There are other size 20s out there, but they are not really size 20 if we're being real, right? This is one of my favorite jig hooks that's come out since it hit the market. I put everything on this because it holds fish really well. It's super strong, even in a 20. I don't bend out the 20, which is awesome, right?
Which is what you want, yeah.
And it's true to size. So with that hook on the size 20, I'll put the 2.5 millimeter jig bomb. And then when you go to the size 18 hook, I'll do the 3 millimeter and do a 3.5 millimeter on that.
That's a big weight package in a very small unit.
In a very small size, yep. And that having that ability to adjust weights on the fly like that, but not necessarily change the profile of the fly, I think is a big benefit, because you can continue to fish this in many different water types simply by clipping one off and putting one on that's a 0.5 millimeter larger, and it's going to give you that faster sink rate. Just like I did earlier today. We were fishing the 2.5 mil in some really skinny, slow water, and we hit up a different section that had water was moving a bit quicker and it was a bit deeper, and all I had to do was cut off the 2.5 mil and put on the 3 mil, and we were in business.
Back in the money.
Yeah.
The other cool thing, I think, again, when you've got these weights organized across different colors, the way they slot into your box, again, kind of like perfect happy accident, and I think this is all designed on a Tyer's behalf, you can see your weight variation staring right up at you, which is awesome.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. That bead is pointing straight up in the air, so you're able to look and see, especially if you have them next to each other. That's how I put them in my box. In a row, I'll have 2.5s here, the 3 mils in the middle, and the 3.5s on the side, and it's very obvious which size is which. So when you need to switch, it's easy to, I'm gonna go with this one
It's
instead.
easier than routing around for split shot and trying to figure out what you had on and what, just like, oh, boom.
Exactly. And you don't have to, some people will use the technique of, finishing it with a different color thread to know different bead sizes. It's just not necessary because you can see it all from how they're lined up in your box.
It's hidden in plain sight.
That's right.
No, this was awesome to watch you play with this one. One of the cool things I thought, specifically this, again, when we were fishing in some of those spots, you were fishing full Euro, right? Talk to me about how you utilize the egg, right, as kind of both a tractor and weight and, the right meal in conjunction with your other flies.
Right. So it's early November right now, and everybody knows it's around that time when the brown trout like to spawn, and so it's I think it's wise to take advantage of that food source. Now, we're not condoning fishing reds here. We saw plenty of reds today, but we stayed away from them. And
walked right by.
Fish are going to eat the eggs even if they're not on a red, right? We want to steer clear of that. Let's just make that abundantly clear.
It's clear.
However, fish are going to take advantage of that food source. Why, if there was high protein coming down the river, why would they pass it up? Because it's an egg, right? So fish are going to take advantage of that food source, and I like to use it in the winter specifically as kind of like my lead fly, especially if I'm not seeing fish rising. So I was fishing a Euro rig today, and oftentimes you'll see that weight put on point and tags up above it.
And point means at the very bottom, right?
Yep, furthest away from your sider. I was actually fishing this. We started the day with 2 eggs on a tag and then trailing a midge behind it. So I was using 2.5 millimeter eggs kind of as my weight to get down.
I watched it tumbling down on the rocks.
And one of the cool things about using that technique is with the water as low and clear as it is, I was able to actually see both eggs while I was fishing. And I was fishing an orange and a cheese, so I could see the different colors and make sure they were floating down the river in the same seam and following each other. And the advantage you get if a fish were to eat the midge is if you can see those eggs, that's going to register when a fish eats that midge significantly faster than you'd see it on the actual cider.
Oh, totally.
Right? Because they're so close. They're sitting 12 to 14 inches from that midge. So when I was fishing that rig, I was not even looking at my cider at all. I would make my cast and I would watch my eggs in the water and watch them drift.
In relation to the fish.
Exactly. And I was watching for movement on those eggs or those eggs to stop drifting because I had a light enough amount of weight. They weren't dragging on bottom. They were just kind of moving perfectly with the current and waiting to see the eggs move to know when to set the hook. That means the fish ate the midge instead.
And we were talking too, like there's so many times in a river like the South Platte that sees the pressure that these fish are so fast that they'll eat and let go before you. It doesn't matter if you're using, you know, bicolor cider indicator material or an indicator.
They will take that in and spit it out before you ever even knew you had a chance to set the hook.
And so having that, like you were saying, as close as possible is only to your advantage.
Exactly. And it works great as an attractor, but in that type of scenario, I was using the egg as my cider, if you will, right? The egg itself was my indicator. And that's just how physics works, right? However close you can get that, whatever is telling you a fish ate to the thing the fish is going to eat, is going to react faster.
And that's nice and bright to see.
Exactly.
I said it before, I don't get excited about eggs. This is an awesome egg.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. I don't fish any other eggs anymore. It's taken the place of all of the eggs that I used to carry on me, just because it produces for me and it provides the weight I need it to, and I don't have a need for another egg anymore.
And they're truly a micro egg, which
Absolutely.
looks super deadly in the water, especially, again, in scenarios where fish are seeing a lot of pressure.
Absolutely. You have a realistic egg profile to it. Fish are going to be much more inclined to eat that than something, you know, if you put a giant bead and then wrap some yarn behind it. It doesn't really look like an actual egg does in nature.
Well, again, Sunnyside egg, super cool little egg pattern. If you haven't fished one yet,
you need to.
You need
to give it a go. And it's not just for Euro nymphing either. It works really, really good. I use this a lot on my clients' rods as the first attractor under an indicator, right? You have your bobber and then put that as your first fly and trail a couple flies behind it. Works so good like that. And you can find one of these that's going to give you the weight you need and you don't have to add any split shot. So it's one less thing on the rig, less to tangle, and it works great as an attractor and your primary source of weight.
No reason not to love that.
That's
so
right.
That same concept here, you rolled into your second signature pattern with Umpqua. Can you tell us about that one?
The Scud Bomb. So it's similar to the egg. I'd been trying to come up with a scud pattern that had a lot of weight incorporated into it, but still had the look of a natural scud, still had that hunchback type of look to it, right? And I had tried using just standard tungsten beads and slotted tungsten beads, and the problem you get with that is you get 50% of the bead under the hook shank going towards the hook point, and it inhibits the hook gap. So you don't get really good hookups sometimes, right? So by using that same technique of kind of posting the bead on a curved shank hook, I was able to come up with this scud pattern. And there's dubbing on each side of the bead, and the bead's posted smack dab in the middle of the hook shank. And with the weight being as far as possible opposite of the point and the down eye on that hook, the fly always rides hook point up. So you're going to have just much less chances of snagging bottom because the fly's always going to ride hook point up. And it's going to give you, just like with the Sunnyside, all the weight you need within the different sizes of that scud. So it's going to come in 2.5 millimeter, 3 millimeter, and 3.5 millimeter sizes also.
And this is that same thing when you have them organized in your fly box.
Exactly.
You can not only see the hot spot the bead creates, but where you're at within your size range for weight.
Exactly. And sometimes I use this even for micro adjustments. So you're using the same beads on the Scud Bomb as you are the egg, right? The Scud Bomb being a larger profile to it sinks a little bit slower. So if I need a micro adjustment which isn't within the egg, I'll oftentimes put, for instance, a 3 millimeter Sunnyside is going to sink faster than a 3 millimeter Scud Bomb. But if the 2.5 isn't going to give me fast enough sink rate, then I'm going to use
275 essentially.
Exactly. I'll use the 3 mil Scud Bomb and it'll slow that sink rate just a tad, but still get me where I need to be. So I'll use that for micro weight adjustments sometimes if I'm not getting where I need to with the Sunnyside itself.
So as a full-time guide, right, this is how you make your living, to have a set of flies like this that, again, work across such a range of fisheries. And, right, you talked about the spawn happening currently, but like, I don't know about you, but an egg in February or the middle of January or, geez, June, for whatever reason you might want to fish one, trout largely are going to eat it.
Absolutely. Oh, the Sunnyside will be my primary fly that I'm going to fishing when it comes to a fly that's weighted through up until about May. Just because it works so good as an attractor. And fish are, with a lot less food sources available in the winter, when the fish see that high protein egg floating down the river, they're very often going to eat it.
Without it looking like a ping pong ball floating down the river.
Exactly, because it's got that realistic size profile.
Totally. All right, so we've got this part of the system. What I want to do is just spend a minute here and talk about how you finish the rig as we move into really the kind of midge, small match the hatch portion of your setup here. I think talking about, again, how this kind of aspect works in your guiding and you know, you and I were talking earlier about a very different setup from the warmer months and what you would do with your clients to find them success versus the winter months. And since we're entering into that season, can you walk us through how you put your rig together as we kind of enter into the small match the hatch, tiny hook world?
For sure. So as we get into the winter, when fish are going to be less likely to rise, they're going to want to hold more towards the bottom. I'm going to fish the Sunnyside as my fly closest to the sider or indicator if I was using a suspension system. I'm going to use that as my primary source of weight, and then I'm going to tractor trailer, if you will, or the traditional kind of rig, 2 flies behind it.
Instead of a split shot, in your mind, you've subbed in a fly that could catch a fish.
Exactly. I've taken away a hinge point, and I've added an attractor that'll give me the weight I need, and fish are very likely to eat it. So I'll often fish the Sunnyside, and then I'll add a little piece of tippet right above the actual fly itself onto the tippet that's above it, and then put another fly 14 inches behind it, and then do the same thing and put another fly 14 inches behind it. By putting that tippet on the tippet above the Sunnyside up, it allows me to slide the tippet up and then make a quick adjustment to the weight of that Sunnyside if I need to switch it from a 2.5 to a 3 or from a 3 or back and forth, right? I can slide what's going to be tractor trailer piece of tippet, the one that's bringing that small midge behind it. I can slide that up the main tippet, snip off that Sunnyside, put on the other size weight I need to, slide that back down to the Sunnyside, and then I'm right back fishing right away. So it gives me the ability to change weights quickly. I feel like I can clip off a fly and tie on another fly faster than I could remove split shot and add split shot. So it has nothing to do with me being anti-split shot. If the scenario calls for split shot, then I'll use split shot. This is just faster for me to make weight changes. And you gotta be good at tying knots.
How many knots do you think you tie in a day?
Any
given day?
Let's just say if it's a good day, 10. Let's say 10.
It's a pretty good day.
That is a great day. Love that.
And the number just goes up from there.
Right. We'll call that the low point.
Well, sweet. So let's talk about some of the flies you fish in conjunction. Oh, sorry.
Let's talk one more thing here, just from an experience we had a little bit earlier today. I was running that Sunnyside and then 2 midges behind it, or double Sunnyside and a midge behind it, and we started noticing fish rising, right? In that type of scenario, if I do want to fly elevated a little bit in the water column because I'm knowing the fish are elevated in the water column, I'll swap that. I'll put that Sunnyside in the middle, and then I can run a midge emerger on a tag, say 14 inches above it. And then I can run a midge larva or a midge pupa, whatever you want to call it, low still, trailing the Sunnyside. So that'll give me a fly that's going to be riding a little higher in the water column if I'm noticing those fish are coming up to eat some emergers or dry flies.
Totally, and it's probably a good just change up from everything just on the bottom.
Absolutely, and even if I'll often make changes like that just to if I'm not having success, right? If if I'm fishing and I'm not having luck and I've changed flies and I'm not having luck, then I'm gonna do something like that. I'll take it from being the first fly and put it in the middle, and now I'll have a small midge up here and a small midge down low, or do all sorts of different changes until I start finding success, and then continue on with what's working.
And I think, you know, a lot of people overlook that higher in the column opportunity, especially in the winter.
Yeah.
You know, trout aren't made to go route around in the gravel.
Yeah, exactly.
They naturally just tip up, and a tip for a good sized trout is that, again, that difference you're talking about. All they had to do was tip up.
Exactly.
With almost no extra energy.
Yeah, exactly. And if you watch fish, particularly trout behavior, they eat upwards a lot more often than they do down. They're going to eat stuff that's coming right at them, or they're going to go up to eat a little bit. They don't often go down to the ground to eat, right? So that changing that rig up to do something like what we were talking about helps with that too.
Glad you stopped me. That's a super cool tip.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about some of those flies that you like to work in tandem with some of this stuff. Where do you want to start?
So let's start, well, we'll start with some midges here. Okay, we got, so some of the flies for tailwaters, specifically around here and throughout the winter. Some of my top choices are going to be something like a demon midge. I think you always have to have some sort of red midge, small red midge larva. And that will produce year round, but it's one of my confidence flies, particularly throughout the winter. So that's going to be one of my go-to when it comes to a midge larva type pattern.
Okay.
And then I like to have different silhouettes or profiles when it comes to emergers.
So that one being an epoxy body, super thin.
Super slim. And if that one I'm going to be keeping lower in the water column.
Trying to right behind that sunny side.
Exactly, right behind the sunny side. Whether I'm doing sunny side and two flies behind it, that one will be the first one trailing it. Or if I'm doing sunny side in the middle and then a tag and a fly behind the sunny side, that demon midge is going to be right behind the sunny side.
So where are you going for another profile?
For another profile, there are two midge emergers that are on the top of my list, and I really like the No Mercy Midge.
Philowani's fly.
Philowani's, yep, and a Blindside from John Easton.
Yeah, and the Blindside's right over here.
And those are both great midge emerger patterns that look incredibly different from each other. Yep. And the thing that they have in common is they both have movement, that aspect of movement to them, right? So these are the flies that I'm going to put higher in the water column. So if we were going egg, midge, midge, I'll go egg, demon midge, and then the very last fly is going to be the No Mercy or the Blindside.
Something that might flutter up a little higher.
Because it's going to flutter up a little bit higher because they don't have a whole lot of weight to them to help bring them down themselves. Or if we were going tag, egg, midge, those would be the ones on the tag that are going to be higher up in the water column.
And is there a time of day where you start looking at that kind of emergent style, or does it matter? Do you need to have a hatch coming on to fish one of these flies?
Not necessarily. However, if I'm starting to notice fish rising or seeing midges, I'll get the midge larva out of there entirely and just go with two emergers, right? Or two pupa.
It's almost kind of like you were talking about that attractant color of an egg or the demon midge, right? That little tuft, or, you know, John's got a little glass bead there.
And the little ostrich on it.
Yep.
Gives that, kind of breathes a little bit.
Yep, and just gives it that little sheen to the front of it, like it's that gas bubble drawing them up.
Exactly, exactly. So those flies work really well for me. And I really don't fish a whole lot other than those when it comes to midge emerger patterns.
But you have a couple other flies in here.
Yes, so you definitely have the probability of coming into a Baetis hatch throughout the winter, especially in our milder climate areas. So I wouldn't be caught without them, right? We didn't have a need for them today, but that doesn't mean you may not need them tomorrow. So I really like the Darth Baetis. It comes in an excellent profile.
Greg Garcia pattern.
Looks just like a little Baetis nymph. Purple is one of my favorite to fish throughout the winter, but it's really good in all of the colors that it comes in. So that's going to be kind of my Baetis nymph, if you will. And then when I talk emerger, I want something that has a wing, right? So that would be my nymph option. And then as far as the Baetis emerger, it's hard to stray from the RS2.
How many fish you think have been caught on Mars?
Oh my God, it's like the Colorado State fly, right? It's hard to stray from that because it's a quick tie. It doesn't involve a lot of materials. It's super easy to change the colors, so you can load up your box with different colors and different sizes, and from my opinion, have basically what you really need for a Baetis emerger, a small mayfly emerger.
What do you think's your top color if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one color, I'd have to go with gray, but black is really, really close, especially when trichos start to show themselves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when the trichos start showing, the grays don't see a whole lot of love anymore.
And as we were talking earlier, you know, over the years of guiding, you've narrowed your assortment.
Yeah.
And in that narrowing, talk to me a little bit about how you organize your box, what you're bringing with you as a guide, to really make sure that you're ready for whatever the day brings.
Yeah. So I like the magnetic boxes for the really small stuff these days. We already kind of talked about the Sunnyside and the Scud Bomb and how I like to organize those. But for the really small stuff that doesn't have a lot of weight, I like to use magnetic boxes, and I'll divvy off compartments to Baetis nymphs, Baetis emergers, and then I'll keep the same colors within each other, but try to split up sizes.
You're bringing like 2 to 3 of each size and color?
Yeah, I'll tie them and say maybe, I pick a pattern that I like, that I have confidence in and success on, and I'll tie that in maybe 2, 3 sizes, more often 2, depending on, because I'm tying it to replicate a specific insect, right? So I'll tie it in 2 or 3 sizes, and then 2 or 3 colors, and that will be my fly for Baetis nymphs, right? So one of the problems I had when I was starting to get into fly tying is I just wanted to tie. I wanted to tie everything, right? So I'd show up to the river and I have 40 different Baetis nymph patterns, and when I'm not having success and I need to go change flies, I open my fly box and I admire all these beautiful flies in there, and it's like, I want to do no, not that one, and then pick this, and it's hard to make up my mind, right? Well, I found if you narrow it down and you have one pattern that represents a Baetis nymph, then basically from there all I have to do is pick a color. So it's made my fly selection on the river a lot faster, and I think that's valuable because it increases the amount of time your flies spend in the water if you're not sitting there looking at flies, right? You got plenty of time to look at flies when you're at home. When you're on the river, it's time to do fishing. It's time to be fishing. So I think if you don't have so many patterns, if you can narrow it down to a pattern you like or 2 patterns you like, maybe that have different profiles. For instance, tie the same fly on a straight shank hook. Now you have a curved shank Darth Baetis and a straight shank Darth Baetis, right? It's still the Darth Baetis though. And then it narrows down your selection. So you know if you're gonna fish a Baetis nymph, it's gonna be this pattern. Then you just have to pick a color. And if you're gonna cycle, you can just cycle colors.
Well, I love the logic you apply to it. It's not just like, oh, I've thrown away 90% of what I fish. No, I've got to have these kind of profiles in a variety of colors.
Exactly.
And that's my core. And we talked a little bit earlier about the idea of confidence flies. What does it take to become a confidence fly to you? And then how often are you mixing in something a little bit different to make sure that you're kind of always one step ahead?
Yeah. You know, I'd say if I fish a fly, let's say 7 days, right? 7 fishing days, and I'm having consistent luck with it, that's kind of like worked its way into, okay, I know this fly works. I like this fly. We might be spending more time fishing this fly, right? I've had instances where I tie an experimental pattern and go out and catch a fish on it and like, okay, sweet, that's awesome. And then go out and the next 10 trips, I don't catch a single fish on it. And it's like, okay, well, that was just that one dumb fish that came and ate my fly that really doesn't work so well, you know? So I would say once I have consistent success with it, it kind of ends up working its way up to my like keep on the radar type of list.
Okay, that's fair. And then as a fly designer, you know, kind of where do you find influence for your tying, but then also how do you use your clients and days on the water to refine those patterns?
Oh yeah. You know, I really like to, just as cheesy as it is, I'll scroll through Instagram and just type in fly tying, right? And just look at flies on there.
A lot of flies on
There's
there.
a lot of flies on there. And you might see something someone did on a particular fly, and maybe that would work really good in a completely different type of scenario, right? So that's where I kind of get some of my inspiration, just looking at what other people are doing, and then maybe tying something to incorporate a specific technique. And then oftentimes I will experiment with it with my clients. Now, I don't want people to think that I'm fishing flies that I don't know if they work, but
I'm assuming you're putting it on once you've caught a few fish, everyone's feeling good.
Exactly. I'll try it out, I'll have some success with it, and then I'll use it, and then other flies that are like on the top tier of my list, right? So I know these 2 flies are gonna catch fish. This is the one where it's like, I'm not 100% sure yet. We're gonna try this. And that's really how I experimented a lot this summer with one of my new leech patterns that's going to be coming out eventually.
Thing's a rock star.
And it did very well for me. And
I wonder why.
I'm super excited for people to see it. But that's kind of exactly what I did with that is I came up with an idea. I tied a whole bunch of them. I handed them out to guide friends. Guides would come in the shop and be like, oh man, check this out. And I'd show them, they're like, oh, that's cool. I'm here, take some of them, fish them, report back to me, let me know what you think about them. And then I'm doing the same thing. And when I start receiving pictures of the fly hanging out of big fish's mouths and they're like, this thing slayed them today, it's like, okay, that makes me feel really good. So that starts to get me confidence in the fly, and then I'll start using it on clients' rigs. And when clients start having confidence or clients start catching fish on it and they're like, oh, sweet. And it's fun to be able to go to them and tell them like, you know what? There's only like 2 other people in the world that know this fly exists right now. And they're like, really? Well, that's cool.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to be on the front edge of stuff. And that's where I was kind of curious about the always tinkering, right? I think that's like the big part of being an angler is having staples, right? Like I turn to this, I know these are going to work in some way, shape, or form if I stick to my pattern.
Yeah.
But then let's also like get weird over here and just see what they will or won't eat.
Oh, totally. And man, if I was to show you how many failures I had, you'd probably not be super excited about it. But that comes with the territory, right?
That's it. That's the whole game.
That's part of it. I would have so many like half-tied or 3/4 tied flies sitting in my little magnetic bowl at home that I got halfway through and I'm like, this is trash.
Ship.
Nope. Got to restart that one, you know? And that's part of the fun too. It can be frustrating, but when it finally all comes together, just like I was saying, that Sunnyside took me 2 years to finally come up with the final product. And when it finally comes together and it starts producing fish, it's like, man, all of that was worth it. All of that time I spent making things that don't work or that are subpar, all of it finally paid off. And we have a final product that I'm so happy with, and fish love to eat it, and it makes all that time worth it.
And how does it feel as a signature tire to like know that that is distributed in now fly bins across the country, and like shops are recommending that for people to take out on their home waters, you know, coast to coast?
It's kind of surreal, man. Like it's still hard for me to believe, and I sometimes feel like I just got lucky stumbling into this technique of posting the bead. But it works so good for exactly, it was out of necessity. It worked for exactly what I needed it to do. And the fact that they're in fly shops and that people are going to other fly shops across the country, and well-renowned Tyers and other fly shops are recommending this fly to people to use. And the fact that I get messages from people that are clear on the other side of the states that are saying, dude, this fly's awesome. Caught so many fish with it today. It's like, I've never seen this person before in my life. It's so awesome and very humbling. And I just feel extremely lucky to be in these shoes, I guess.
And they're wet right now, which is even luckier.
Yes, they are.
Well, Hans, I think this was awesome. If people didn't pick up a few tips or different ways to think about how they approach the tailwaters, they must have been head under the water in the sand. Because this was super enlightening, and I think it takes this really cool look at this idea of some of these Euro tactics, and you're not a competition guy at all.
I'm not. I'm not like anti-split shot or anything like that.
You're what works.
I'm whatever catches fish. Okay, so that's strictly what I do. I do what I do just to catch fish. I care not if it's got split shot or doesn't have split shot. It's whatever works for me to catch fish. That's all I care about.
And I think it's this awesome hybrid model of, like, you know, we talked about flies that I would consider the RS2, right? It is, like you said, the Colorado State fly, like such a staple that when I first fished it, it was an inline rig under split shot, and it's in a totally different presentation now with this kind of hybrid Euro setup you've got going. Well done.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. And I'd encourage people to try kind of the Euro rigging, if you will, under your standard bobber. Put your heaviest fly furthest away from the bobber and put a couple tags up there and put some nymphs up there. You'd be surprised how fast that indicator reacts when a fish eats one of those tag flies, right? We often have this delay, if you will. If a fish eats the very last fly and your weight's down here and the bobber's up here, the bobber just slows down a little bit until things start to get in line, right? When you're fishing weight on the bottom, tags up above it, a fish eats those tags, you're going to see it almost instantaneously.
Instant registration,
on that indicator. So definitely, if you're not into the Euro thing, don't let that stray you from trying sort of Euro-minded techniques on your standard suspension setup.
You don't have to do a competition.
Exactly. You don't
have to still go fun fishing.
Yes, yes.
Well, Hans, if someone wanted to go fun fish with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You know, your best bet is you can hit me up on Instagram if you want to. It's @TroutJuice. Or you can always call, I work out of Anglers Covey down in Colorado Springs. You can always call Anglers Covey and book a trip with me there. And I'd love to take you out to do anything you want to do. If you want to start getting into the Euro thing, I'd love to teach you that. If you want to just kind of learn Euro techniques to use with your suspension setup, I teach that a lot too.
Well-rounded individual here. Well,
I just like to catch fish, man.
Thank you so much for your time, Hans. This has been awesome, awesome. And thank you guys for joining in on this great conversation. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Flies 4. If you did, hit the like button. We certainly appreciate that. And subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for future Flies 4 this coming season.